Hi, Susan. How are you tonight?
Hi. I'm good.
It was so quiet, I didn't know if anybody was talking.
I didn't hear anything either.
Hi, Susan. Hi,
Hi.
Hey,
Steve.
Susan, Simon.
Hi. I've
This is
got my,
Margie saying hello.
how are you guys doing?
How are you doing?
Hey there. Hi, Susan. Hi, Margie. And Steve, is that your new home? Hello. Well, the host muted us, but I'm unmuted us. And where's the synagogue?
Okay, we're unmuted again.
Well, we're also not seeing the synagogue. I saw the synagogue at first.
It'll come back.
Is that your new home?
No, this is the house we've lived in for 25 years.
Oh, it's nice.
It is
We
nice.
love this.
That's
We love it. It's just not made for aging.
Too many levels.
Gotcha. Neither is mine, but don't that we the exercise I get is up and down the steps.
Yep.
Oh, so y'all decided not to go either. I decided not to go tonight. I've been on the phone all day with voters.
Um,
And what is this?
That's a, what do you call it?
I don't
Like
know.
a pot sticker, like a dumpling.
Oh.
So there's two, one for each of us.
Okay.
I think this is my new shoe.
Okay.
This is yours.
Okay.
Oh,
And this is yours.
Hey, Aaron. And Doris. Are you in North Carolina, Doris? Yeah.
Well, I guess there are 15 of us, and I guess they're trying to figure out how to get us back to the synagogue.
That's a good question.
Hmm.
Yolanda says she can
That will be our last greeting for the evening. We'll take a look at some of the customs of Tisha B'av, but saying hello, particularly saying hello with the shalom. How are you? We avoid that. I'm not being heard on my, because I'm not talking into the microphone. Okay, sorry about that. I'm used to a wireless mic. So I was just saying to the folks here in person, Shavuot Tov will be the last greeting that we offer to each other for the evening, befitting the atmosphere of sadness and grieving for Tisha B'av. I invite you to get a siddur as we go to our evening service. We'll do Mari, the evening service. We will talk a little bit about the customs of Tisha B'av. We'll chant and read English selections from Eicha, from Lamentations. We'll do some more talking, we'll do some singing. You'll see. You'll see, it'll all come together. It's not the Shabbat Siddur. It'll say on the front, Limot Chol, as we just said, the Kodesh L'Chol. It's the daily prayer book on the spine.
And not Shabbat V'Hagim.
Not Shabbat V'Hagim, daily prayer book. And Abby is putting that up now. Okay? And we're going to start right away with Baruch Hu. So once you get your Siddur, I invite you to rise in body or spirit. And if I'm far away from you, I'm going to take my mask off. I hope people are not okay with that. Please do say something. Self-advocacy is important. God is compassionate, forgiving human error, and refusing to destroy, ready to refrain from anger, unwilling to awaken wrath. Extend your help, redeeming one. Give answer, sovereign one, whenever we may call. Again, we do rise in body or spirit, whatever is available to you. 260 and 261 in our Siddur. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMorach. be seated. Page 264. I guess I'm going to take this with me when I sit down. All right, we'll figure this out, Zoom folks. Yeah. Maybe we can set up the stand so it just points down toward me. And we are on 264. Praised are you, God, ruler of the universe, who has ordained the rhythm of life. Please join me. The day with its light calls to activity and exertion. But when the day wanes and when the setting of the sun colors fade, we cease from our labors and welcome the tranquility of the night. The subdued light of the moon and stars, the darkness and the stillness about us, thank you, invite rest and repose. Trustfully, we yield to the quiet of sleep, for we know that while we are unaware of what goes on within and around us, our powers of body and mind are renewed. Therefore, at this evening hour, we seek composure of spirit. We give thanks for the day and its tasks, and for the night and its rest. Praised are you, God, who brings on the evening. Baruch atah Adonai Hamari Varavi. Ahavad Olam 267. We'll go into the Shema 269. Ahavad Olam Beit Yisrael Amcha Avta Torah u'mitzvot Chukim u'mishpatim Otanu lema'ageta Al ken Adonai Eloheinu B'shomeinu v'kumeinu Nasiach b'chukecha V'nizmach b'divrei Toratecha u'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed Ki hem chayenu ve'orech yameinu ve'orech yameinu uva'yem yomam v'layla yomam v'layla. Your love will never depart from us as long as worlds endure. Baruch atah Adonai Ohev Amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha v'chol nafshecha v'chol me'odecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha Vishinantam livanecha v'nivarta bam b'shivtecha b'veitecha u'v'leftecha v'derech u'v'shofecha v'kumecha u'v'shartam le'ot ha'yadecha v'hayu letzotavot v'necha Uvtavtam al mezuzot beitecha uvisharecha. On page 272, I call as witnesses concerning you, both heaven and earth, both life and death, that I have placed in front of you a blessing and a curse. Choose life, that you may live, you and your seed. Page 277, 3.5 lines from the bottom, the 2 dots. Leman tizkeru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai, yitem kedoshim lelohechem, ani Adonai Elohechem, asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim, liot lachem Elohim, ani Adonai Elohechem, Adonai Elohechem, Emet. Page 283. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar ba'kodesh, Nora Tehilo Ose Fela Malchutecha rovanecha b'kei hayam livnei Moshe uMiriam. Your children saw you in your majesty, splitting the sea in front of Moses. This is my God, they cried and said, Adonai, Yimloch, Le'olam, Baruch atah Adonai Ka'al Yisrael. 284, last 4 words of the first paragraph. Ufros aleinu sukkah, sukkah, shalom echa, ufros aleinu sukkah, sukkah, shalom echa, ufros aleinu, sukkah, sukkah, shalom echa. Baruch atah Adonai shomer am Yisrael v'chol yoshvei tevel la'ad. Blessed are you, compassionate one, who guards the people Israel and all who dwell on earth. We say Amen. And I invite you to personally turn to page, or collectively turn to page 294. There is the evening Amidah for weekdays is 294 to 323. Call this the Shemona Esrei, which means 18 blessings. There's actually 19, you'll notice, because we're Jews and it never can be exactly what you think. So I'm not supposed to make jokes on Tisha B'av. But it's the 18 blessings that are 19. We rise in body or spirit for this. Take as much time as you need in any part of this room or outside. We'll know that you have finished your Amidah when you are seated. Ose shalom bimroma, Uyase shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imeru. Amen. Maker of peace in the heavens, make peace for us, for all the people of Israel, for all who dwell on earth. Amen. So I'm going to invite you to take the sheet that says, "Why are we sitting on the floor?" And I'm impressed by how game everyone is to actually sit on the floor or on a little stool. So we will ask Abby to share this with our Zoom Jews. And it should say the day is the side we want to start with. So while we do that, does anyone have experience with Tisha B'av? Is there a reason that you came? Is this the first time you've ever come to a Tisha B'av experience? Is Ayola, yeah, this is first time. Okay. All right. What has drawn people here? Well, just so you haven't related to it? You said?
However, now I just feel how fabulous to have a day of mourning everything.
Yeah. So, and if, does it say Elizabeth? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So Elizabeth says, I'm going to repeat things because we don't have microphones right now. We're working on that, ambient microphones. So Elizabeth said that you've never done it before, but just the idea of a day of mourning is, just speaks to you right now.
The temple of our life.
Beautiful. The temple of our lives sometimes is in ruins. Okay, we'll talk about the temple some more. One or two other thoughts as to why, yeah.
So this is not my first.
Not your first
Tisha
Tisha
B'av. But the reason I came is because I've had some trouble accessing my grief, my feelings, and I want to. And I had also learned, through prior Tisha B'av experiences, about the power of doing that collectively.
Yeah, the problem, the challenge of accessing our own grief, and how when we do that together, we can support, just like a group that's joyous, individual joy is greater than the sum of its parts, individual mourning, grieving. I talked at the Minyan this afternoon, evening about how Americans always expect everything to have a happy ending, partly because they're alienated from their own history, in which many American endings are not happy. We have that problem. We have a whole happiness industry in which I can sell you books and tea cozies and things with slogans that will ensure your happiness. And we know that's not true. Sometimes you're just sad. Sometimes you're just broken. And this is the day for really accessing that. So yeah, one other.
This is my first official Tisha B'av
First time in Tisha B'av.
observance. But as I'm leading mindful moments and offering Rosh Chodesh groups and bringing this to others, I wanted to get more informational support.
Okay, so just if you're here, so Rebecca talks about leading mindful moments, and just get more information. Like, what's this Jewish thing that we do? So if you're here just to learn, you're in a good place because I've got a whole study sheet for you, for us. So we're on it does say page 1 on the bottom. If you're looking here, it says the day on top. Tisha means 9, Ba means in, and Av means Av, the month of Av. So Tisha B'av is the 9th of Av, in the same way that Tu B'Shvat, if you know that, the new year of the trees. 2 is Tet and Vav are 9 plus 6. That makes 15. Be Shabbat, the 15th of Shabbat. This is the 9th of Av. It is the day that both temples, according to our tradition, were destroyed. If you, I can give you I'll do the quick, dirty Jewish history of the temple. So the Israelites are in Deuteronomy right now on the precipice of the land of Canaan. They get Canaan, it becomes Israel. It's King Solomon who builds the temple after King David unifies Jerusalem. It is destroyed by, well, the kingdom split because we're Jews. Again, we fight and there's a break also. So 10 of the 12 tribes go north, form the kingdom of Israel. 2 of the 12 tribes go south, form the kingdom of Judah. It is King Solomon who builds the temple, like I said. The northern kingdom doesn't have a centralized temple. The northern kingdom of Israel. They have high places, they call them Bamot. And when they're defeated by the Assyrians in 722 BCE, there's no temple. It's the Judean temple that's destroyed by the Babylonians in 586 BCE. Israelites are exiled. Actually, the big shots of the Judeans, I should say, are exiled. They come back in 537. Cyrus, the Persian, has defeated the Babylonians. He lets them rebuild the temple. And it's the same temple that stays through Greek rule, which is then despoiled, the Hanukkah story. It's rededicated. And then the Romans beat the Greeks, take over, and destroy the second temple in the year 70. Both happen on the 9th of Av. There are other events in Jewish history, other moments of calamity that happen on the 9th of Av. You see that the First Crusade is declared by Pope Urban II about 1,000 years ago. King Edward in England signs an expulsion edict, and then 1492, which is famous to the Jews for our expulsion. Pope Paul IV in 1555 says that the Jews have to go into ghettos. It's an Italian word, ghetto. World War I breaks out in 1914. The bombing of the synagogue center in Buenos Aires in 1994, 28 years ago. So, except for World War I, you notice that the enemies of the Jews do bad stuff on Tisha B'av. Could be a coincidence, could be the cosmic alignment of stars and planets on it's just a bad day. At least as likely, I'll say, is that people who hate Jews know when we're sad, and they're, it's a little bit of a zetz, we would say. Like, oh, this is your day of mourning. Well, guess what? We're gonna. This time, we're really gonna get rid of you. If the Romans and the Babylonians can do it, we're gonna do it. Because so far, it hasn't happened. Questions, comments, thoughts on that, just so far? Yeah, and tell me your name because I can't see your name.
Betsy Gard.
Betsy, yeah.
So my question is, when did Tisha B'av start to be commemorated?
It's a great question. So it's talked about in the Talmud, and it's always a question with Talmud. Is the Talmud enacting laws, or is the Talmud taking folk customs and codifying them? And so I don't know. So much of rabbinic Judaism, which is really the Judaism that we practice, we can talk about that in a Talmud class, right? So much of rabbinic Judaism is the challenge of figuring out how to keep the Jews together when their temple, their center, is no longer, right? And so let's talk for a second about why it would be commemorated, right? It's a building, okay, big building. We like buildings. All right, we move to a different building. What's the big deal? Right? 3 important things happen in the temple, in the Beit HaMikdash, the house of holiness. Right? Mikdash related to Kodesh, Kaddish, Kedusha, all those words that you know. Maybe you might know. So we start with religious center. The main spiritual technology for the Jews was sacrifice. Take the agricultural products, you take the animal, the offering, you give it to the priest. The priest's job is to set it on fire and send the smoke up to God. God likes barbecue. Barbecue for God. Right? Because the smoke is going to go up from the thing and it's going to go up to heaven. And there's your conduit. There's your heaven and earth conduit, right? So that's number one thing that the temple does. Second thing the temple does is it's a social center. We have 3 pilgrimage festivals when you bring those sacrifices where everyone is expected to show up. Shalosh Regalim, the 3 foot festivals, you walk there, you make a pilgrimage. Sukkot, Passover, and Shavuot. You see everybody, it's a get-together, right? And then you have political. The Sanhedrin, the great Sanhedrin meets at the temple. So it's the Supreme Court of the Jewish people. When that building is destroyed, that's a 3-for-1. So, God forbid, imagine your synagogue, your state or national capital, and whatever your major social center is are all destroyed at once. The closest we can conceive of is 9/11 because financial center, the World Trade Center, and a military center in the Pentagon were attacked. But I mean, imagine DC is wiped out, synagogue, maybe all the synagogues you know are wiped out. I mean, it's a calamity that's hard to imagine for us, thank God, right? We can imagine other calamities, but this, where everything is taken away all at once, and part of what the Talmud is doing is creating out of the rubble of these losses a new or a revised or a reconstructed civilization. And so it becomes, this day is part of a constellation of behaviors that recall this lost temple. There are prayers in our traditional prayer book. There's the breaking of the glass at the wedding, which has to do with a rabbi who sees people getting too happy and they're like, don't you remember the temple's destroyed? He breaks a glass, right? We don't think of it that way, right? Some people have unfinished parts of their house, right? They'll leave like exposed, internal brick or whatever your house is made of. They won't plaster it, right? So it's this part of this whole like, hey, we're going to recreate. We have no more altar, so we'll make your Shabbat table the altar, right? Okay, we can do this, but don't forget we lost the temple, right? Okay, so I've talked too much at this point. Other questions? Yeah. Sandra,
So,
thank you.
am I mistaken that Crystal Knot was also not on?
Crystal Knot is November, so that would not be. Tisha B'av is not going to fall in November. It's November 8th and 9th, right? 9th? Yeah, so there might be some other things that, that would be a Nazi thing to do, would be to pick Tisha B'av to do something horrible. But I don't think this is what I have from my knowledge. But, yeah, other questions, comments? There are other days that we have that are we call them minor fast days. The 10th of Tevet is when Jerusalem is besieged by the Romans. The 17th of Tammuz was fairly recently. The Romans siege. What's that called when you besiege? But there's I think there's a word that I'm forgetting. Anyway, nothing gets in or out. No more sacrifices can get in. So that's a particularly painful moment, right? Blockade, that's the word I was thinking of, thank you. There's a blockade of Jerusalem. So nothing gets in or out. And this is the beginning, 17th of Tammuz was last month, beginning of Bein HaMetzarim, within the oppressions, dire straits, essentially, right? And those are the 3 weeks. If you hear people talk about the 3 weeks, it's the 3 weeks between the 17th of Tammuz and Tisha B'av. 3rd of Tishrei is going to happen next month. No, 2 months. Whew. Tishrei is after Elul. We get some more time. Those of us in the choir and the clergy get some more time to get ready for Rosh Hashanah. That's when the governor is assassinated. So there's this whole group of things that happen that slowly the Romans are strangling the life out of the Jewish community in Jerusalem. And other customs that we have, you may know some of these, and we wrote some of these in our email, maybe. Fasting, so some of us are fasting starting now and going through tomorrow. you eat the final meal before the fast with ashes. Didn't do that, but you get the sense. What's the ashes are obvious. The destruction, the burn. Well, maybe it's not obvious. The Romans burned the temple down, so I shouldn't say it's obvious. The Churban, the full destruction of the temple, is carried out through fire. And so you sprinkle some ashes on your food. Similar to Yom Kippur, no leather, no bathing, no sex. Some of us are wearing sneakers, sandals, or no shoes. If you're wearing leather and you want shoes and you want to take them off, you can, by the way. Because some people need to wear leather because it's for a safety issue to keep their feet okay. And you see we have low light, you see we're sitting on the floor, and we're going to chant Eicha in a minute. No talit or tefillin at the morning prayer. Normally we wear talit and tefillin in the morning. And really those are signs of royalty, of being, special, God-connected folks. And so even that, we eschew, if that's the way to pronounce that. I'm going to pause here. Are there questions, comments, thoughts on any of this? Otherwise, I'm going to say we're going to go into Eicha, which is Lamentations. Anthony?
Just that the word that you said is for the destruction of the temple by fire.
Churban, yeah.
It's the word for the Holocaust in Yiddish, Churban. It's exactly the same word, so there's kind of a connection.
So Anthony, who speaks Yiddish, says that Churban in Hebrew, which is the destruction of the temple by fire, in Yiddish is Churban, which is Churban, which is the word for that it's used in Yiddish for the Holocaust. So it's the same, there's a connection here of a wholesale destruction, right? And I think that's actually what the word Holocaust actually means in Greek, right? It comes from the Greek. So we're going to pause here, and then we're going to look at some of the other questions or thoughts or any sources on the second page. And so shifting gears to get our copies of Eicha and Lamentations. Here. So we have a few different ways of looking at it. We've got some books. I think we've got some Hebrew there. Everyone, there's some handouts. Did we not think of this for online, folks? No, Abby? Did we not think of putting Eicha up for the folks online? You don't have that. Can you go to Sefaria? I bet we can do this on the fly. sefaria.org. Yep. I can spell it again if you need me to. sefaria.org. And, what did I do wrong? S-E-F. sefaria.org. See where it says, we can make a donation later. It's a beautiful thing to do. You see on the left where it says Tanakh. Okay, click that. And then we're going to scroll down. Keep going. And it says, right there, it says Lamentations. All right, so we'll start. Yeah. Okay. We're going to read, there's a special chant. First of all, that was actually helpful because people could see where Lamentations shows up, where Eicha shows up in the Jewish Bible. Jewish Bible is called Tanakh. Is that the word we're familiar with? Some people are nodding.
Yeah.
So yeah, TNK, Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, Torah, prophets, writings, Ketuvim, the writings. The rabbis decide what goes in the Ketuvim. Was an argument. Lamentations is one of these books that the rabbis included. It is, you'll see, a lament about loss and about how sad we are. So we're going to read some of it in Hebrew. There's a special chant that goes, it's the same symbols as the chant that you know if you do Torah reading. Different melody. One of the trope systems. Shayna is on Zoom, I believe. She's going to chant the first 8 verses.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Turn the TV volume back on.
Turn the TV volume on.
Very good.
If people are still lost or they don't know where they're, please stop me if you're having trouble figuring out where you're supposed to be right now.
Are we ready?
Oh, this is so complicated. I don't know what we would do without Greg and Abby. We'd be so lost.
You know what? Yeah.
I've been asked to say something. Can you hear me?
Okay, we still can't hear Shayna. And you're not muted, I'm sure.
Nope. I'm good to start? Okay, I'm gonna start. And I apologize for background noise. I'm in a hotel room. Echa yashva vadad ha'ir rabtiyam hayeta ke'almana rabti vagoyim sarti b'medinot hayeta lamas b'chotiv ke balayla v'dimata alecheya ein la menachem mikol ohavea kol re'ea bagduva hayu la le'oivim galta Yehuda me'oni u'merov avoda hi yashva v'goyim lo matza manoach kol rodfeha hisiguha ben hamitzrim darchei Tzion avelot mibli ba'ei moed kol se'areha shomemin kohaneha nenachim betulateha nugot vehi marla hayu se'areha lerosh oiveha shalu ki Adonai hoga al rov peshaeha olaleha halchu shvi lifnei tzar vayetze Tzion kol hadara hayus shareha ke'ayalim lo matzu mireh vayelchu b'lo choach lifnei rodef zachra Yerushalayim yemei aniyah u'merodeha kol machamodeha asher hayu mimei kedem binfol amma beyad tzar ve'en ozer la re'u hatzara צחקו על משפטיה, חטא חטא ירושלים, על כן לנידה הייתה. כל מכבדיה הזילוה, כי ראו ערוותה, גם היא נאנחה, ותשב אחור.
How? There's a sense of how is this possible? There's an oi to it. And so we'll read these verses in English. I'll read them. How the city that flocked with people sits alone. She is like a widow. She who was great among nations, princess of states, now a bonded colony. She weeps through the nights, on her cheek tears. Of all her friends, there is none to console her. All her lovers have betrayed her, become enemies to her. Oppression has exiled Judah, oppression and the harshness of her labor. She sits among nations, finds no resting place. All her pursuers have caught her among the narrow places. That's Hamitzarim. And by the way, Mitzrayim, a similar word, so that in the Hebrew that there's an echo there. Narrow places. Tsuris, also connected to Mitzar and Mitzrayim. The streets of Zion are grieving. Festive times, but no one comes. All her gates are desolate. Her priests are groaning. Her young girls are sorrowful. And she, her life is bitter. Her foes are the head of this beast now. Her enemies tranquil, for Adonai has brought her sorrow for all her crimes. Her infants walked off captive before foes. It is gone from daughter Zion, all her honor gone. Her princes have become like deer that find no pasture, walking without strength before pursuers. She remembers Jerusalem in her days of oppression and wandering, all the ones she treasured who once were then, how her people fell at the foe's hands with none to help her. They see her now, these enemies, and laugh at what has ceased in her. She has sinned. Jerusalem sinned, and so she has become an outcast. All who once respected her abase her. They have seen her naked. Now she too is groaning and sits apart. Her impurity stains her skirts. She forgot what her end would be. Her fall was startling. None console her. Adonai witnessed this oppression. The enemy grew strong. I'm going to stop there and wonder if somebody wants to pick up from, I think it's verse 10. I don't have verse numbers in this book, actually. And then the question will be how folks on Zoom can hear them. So maybe we'll pass the microphone, if that's okay. Yeah? Can I?
Verse 10. The elders of Zion sit mournfully upon the ground and are silent. They have covered their heads with dust and girded themselves with sackcloth. The maidens of Jerusalem bow their heads to the ground. My eyes grow weak from weeping. My heart is troubled. I am deeply pained for the destruction of my people because young children and infants faint in the city streets.
This is verse 10 of chapter 1.
I think you're on chapter 2.
Yeah.
Verse 10, chapter 1. The enemy has carried away all her treasures. She has seen foreign nations enter her temple. Ah, yes, those very ones whom thou hast forbidden to enter therein. All her people languish. They search for bread. They barter their treasures for food in order to keep alive. See, O Lord, and behold how abject I have become. Let it not happen to you, all who pass by. Behold and see if there be any pain like the pain with which the Lord in his or her anger has afflicted me. From on high he has sent down a fever into my bones, and it has weakened me. He spread a net for my feet, ensnaring me. He has left me faint and ridden with pain all day long. He has knit my sins one to the other and pressed them upon my neck like a yoke, sapping my strength. The Lord has delivered me to an enemy over whom I cannot prevail. The Lord has made powerless all my mighty men. He has assembled an army against me to crush my young men. The Lord has trodden Jerusalem as in a winepress. For all this I weep, my eyes overflow with tears, for the Comforter who could bring me relief has deserted me. My children are desolate because the foe has prevailed. Zion stretches out her hands, but there is none to comfort her. The Lord has commanded that all those who surround Jacob should be his adversaries. Jerusalem is among them as one unclean. The Lord is righteous. I have rebelled against his commandment. Hearken, all you nations, and behold my pain. My maidens and my young men have gone into captivity. I called to my allies, but they have deceived me. My priests and my elders perished in the city as they searched for food to keep alive. O Lord, consider my anguish. I writhe in pain, and my heart is turned within me, for I have wantonly rebelled. Outside, the sword slays. At home, death threatens. My foes have heard that I am helpless, and yet there is none to comfort me. They have heard my plight and rejoice that thou hast caused it. Ah, thou wilt bring the day which thou hast proclaimed, that day when their lot shall be like mine. Judge all their wickedness and do unto them as thou hast done unto me for all my sins. For my sighs are many and my heart is faint.
So,
I don't want to telegraph too much of this, but you'll notice that there are some themes that you'll keep seeing come up. So there's this intermingling of just, I can't believe this is happening. There's, we did this. There's something in us that caused this, in Jerusalem, in the priests, the leaders, the prophets, the people, and that there's something wrong with the enemy. So you see that they're all mixed together, and they're not necessarily cohesive or consistent. So can I have someone to read in English, chapter 2, verses 9 through 18? Okay, in the back.
What again?
Chapter 2, verse 9 to 18.
Her gates are sunk into the ground. Her gates are sunk into the ground. He has broken her bars. Her king and leaders are exiled among the nations. The Torah is no more. Her prophets are bereft of divine vision. The elders of Zion sit mournfully upon the ground and are silent. They have covered their heads with dust and girded themselves with sackcloth. The maidens of Jerusalem bow their heads to the ground.
My eyes grow weak and weeping. My heart is troubled. I am deeply pained for the destruction of my people, because young children and infants faint in the city streets. They cry to their mothers, "Where is corn and wine?" And they faint like wounded men, gasping their lives in their mother's bosom. To what can I compare you, and to whom can I liken you, O Jerusalem? Whose misfortune can equal yours, that I might comfort you, O Zion? For your destruction is as vast as the ocean. Who can heal you? Your prophets have deluded you with false and foolish visions. They did not reveal to you your iniquity, so that you might escape captivity. They devised for you oracles of falsehood and flattery. Passerbys gloat over you. They hiss and toss their heads at the city of Jerusalem. Is this the city that men call the perfection of beauty, the joy of the whole earth? All your enemies open their mouths against you. They hiss and gnash their teeth and say, "We have swallowed her up. Certainly this is the day for which we have longed. We have found it. At last we have seen it." The Lord has carried out what he intended. He has fulfilled the threat which he made long ago. He has unsparingly destroyed and has caused the enemy to rejoice over you. He has brought triumph to the foe. Let your heart cry to the Lord. O wall of Zion, day and night, let tears run down like a river. Give yourself no respite. Let not your eyes cease from weeping. Arise, cry out in the night, at the beginning of each night watch. Pour out your heart like water before the Lord. Lift up your hands to him for the sake of your infants who faint from hunger in the streets. Behold, O Lord, and consider against whom thou hast done all these things. Are women to eat their children, the infants they have fondled? Are priest and prophet to be slain in God's temple? Young and old lie homeless in the streets. My maidens and my young men are fallen by the sword. Without pity hast thou slain them in the day of thy wrath. Thou hast called, as in the day of assembly, my terror on every side. No one escaped or survived on the day of the Lord's anger. All whom I have nursed and nurtured, my enemy has destroyed.
I believe this is either 18 or 19. Again, I don't have numbers in this book. Kumi Roni Balayla Lerosh Ashmurot Shivchi Chamayim Libech Nochach Panei Adonai Sei Elav Kapayich Al Nefesh Ol Alayich Ha'atuvim Barav Berosh Kol Chutzot Rei Adonai V'habita Lami Olata Ko Im Tochalna Nasim Piryam Olale Tepuchim Im Yeharei B'mikdash Adonai Kohen v'Navi Shachu la'aretz chutzot Na'ar v'zakein Betulatai v'churai Naflu b'charev Harata b'yom ha'pecha Tapachta lo chamalta Tikra Kayom moed megurai misaviv V'lo haya B'yom Av Adonai palit v'sari Asher tifachti v'rabiti, oevi kilam. In English, chapter 3, Anthony, I'm going to invite you to come on up. Join me next. You can sit next to me if you want. I am the man who has seen affliction under the rod of God's anger. He has led me and caused me to walk in darkness and not in light. He turned his hand against me again and again, all day long. He has made my skin and flesh old. He has broken my bones. He has heaped upon me bitterness and misery. He has placed me in the netherworld as those who have long been dead. He has fenced me in so I cannot go forth. He has made my chain heavy. Even when I cry and call for help, he shuts out my prayer. He has blocked my way with boulders and made my paths bewildering. He is to me like a bear lying in wait, as a lion in ambush. He has turned me away from my paths and pulled me in pieces. He has made me desolate. He has bent his bow and made me a target for his arrow. He has shot his arrows into my body. I have become a derision to all people, the subject of their taunting all the day. He has filled me with bitterness and sated me with wormwood. He has broken my teeth with gravel stones and covered me with ashes. I have no more peace. I have forgotten prosperity. And I said, gone is my strength and my expectation from God. Remember my affliction and my anguish, which is like wormwood and gall. I still remember them and am bowed down. But this I recall, and therefore I have hope. The mercies of the Lord are not consumed. His loving compassions never fail. They are renewed every morning. Great is God's faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, I say. Therefore I will hope in him. The Lord is good to those who have faith in him, to them who seek him. It is good to wait patiently for God's deliverance. It is good for a man that he be disciplined in his youth. Let him sit alone in silence when the Lord punishes him. Let him submit his punishment. Let him submit to his punishment. Perchance there is still hope. Let him turn his cheek to his oppressor and be filled with remorse. For the Lord will not forsake us forever. Though he cause grief, he will have compassion according to his abounding mercies. For he does not willingly afflict, nor grieve the children of men, that prisoners be cruelly treated, that a man be deprived of justice before the Most High, that a man be defrauded of his legal rights. Of all this the Lord disapproves. Who can bring anything about unless the Lord commands it? Are not evil and good alike decreed by the Most High? Why should mortal man complain when he is punished for his sins? Let us search and examine our ways and return to the Lord. Let us sincerely pray with our hearts unto God in heaven. We have sinned and we have rebelled, and therefore thou hast not pardoned. Thou hast covered thyself with anger and hast pursued us. Thou hast slain unsparingly. Thou hast covered thyself with a cloud, so that no prayer can pass through. Thou hast made us but offsourcing and refuse among the nations. All our enemies have opened their mouth wide to denounce us. Terror and ensnarement have come upon us, desolation and destruction. My eyes overflow with tears because of the destruction of my people. My eyes overflow unceasingly and continually, until the Lord look down and behold from heaven. The sight of my people's misery in the city has caused me anguish. Without cause my enemies have hunted me as if I were a bird. They have imprisoned me in a dungeon and have cast a stone to cover up the pit. Water flowed over my head. I said, I am cut off. Out of the lowest depth I called upon thy name, O Lord. Thou heardest my voice. Hide not thine ear when I cry unto thee. Thou didst draw near me when I called upon thee. Thou saidst, fear not. O Lord, thou hast pleaded my case and saved my life. O Lord, thou hast seen the wrongs done unto me. Judge thou my cause.
Thou hast seen their vengeance and their evil designs against me. Thou hast heard, O Lord, all their reproaches and plots against me, the words of my attackers and their utterances against me all day long. Behold how in their coming and going I am subject to their taunting songs. Punish them, O Lord, according to the evil they have done. Give them hardness of heart. May thy curse be upon them. Pursue them in anger and destroy them from under thy heavens. Chapter 4.
Eicha Yoam Zahav Yishne HaKetem HaTov Tishtapechna Avnei Kodesh Berosh Kol Chutzot B'nei Tzion HaYikarim Hamsulaim B'Hapaz Eicha Nechshavu L'Nivlei Charas Masei Yadei Yotzer Gam Tanim Chaltzu Shad Heineku Gorehem Batamil La'achzar Kieni Bamidbar Tavak Lashon Yonek Al Chiko Batzama Olalim Shalu Lechem Hores Enin Lam Hauchlim Lemadanim Nashamu Bechutzot Ha'amunim Ale Tolah Hibku Ashpato V'idal Avon Bat Ami Machatat Sodom Ha'afucha Como Rega Lo Chalu Bayadayim. How dull gold has become. How that finest gilt has changed. The sacred stones poured out at the end of every street, precious children of Zion, worth their very weight in gold. How they are considered now as cheap clay jugs, the work of potters' hands. Even jackals bring out udders, give their cubs to suck. The daughter of my people is cruel like desert ostriches. The tongues of little ones have clung to their mouth roofs with thirst. Infants ask for bread. None break it for them. Those who once ate the finest foods stand desolate in the streets. Those brought up in clothes of scarlet now embrace trash heaps. The sin of my people is greater even than that of Sodom, which was turned over all in a moment. No hand touched it. Jerusalem's Nazarites were cleaner than snow once, brighter than milk, glowing warm from within, more than rubies, hewn finely as sapphires. Now they are darker than pitch, not recognized in the streets, with skin shriveled against bones, dry as wood. Better to be killed by the sword than killed by hunger. The slain at least seep at their wounds, do not starve for the yield of meadows. The hands of loving women have cooked their own children. These have become their nourishment, the breaking of my maiden nation's fast. Adonai burned all God's anger, poured out all God's flaming rage. God set fire blazing in Zion, and it consumed all her foundations. The rulers of the world didn't believe it. Not anyone living on earth. That a foe, an enemy, would come and cross Jerusalem's gates. For the sins of her prophets, the offenses of her priests, within her midst pour out the blood of righteous people. The blind shift through the streets, disgusting with blood. No one possibly could touch those clothes. Keep away, impure, they cry out to them. Away, away. Do not touch. Floating, shifting away. Let's go to chapter 5, which is the last chapter
And then you'll see at the end there's a part where we chant it, and you'll repeat it after me. You'll see what we'll do. And someone wanted, or willing, I should say, to read chapter 5 in English.
Consider, O Lord, what has happened to us. Behold and see our humiliation. Our land is given over to strangers, our homes to aliens. We are as fatherless orphans, like these. Our mothers are as widows. We pay dearly for the water we drink and the wood we use. We are pursued, and heavy is the yoke on our necks. We are weary and have no rest. To obtain bread, we have submitted to Egypt and to Assyria. Our fathers have sinned and are no longer among the living. We have borne the penalty of their guilt. Slaves rule over us, and there is none to rescue us. We obtain our bread at the peril of our lives because of the sword in the wilderness. Our skin glows like an oven because of the feverish heat of famine. They have ravished the women of Zion, the maidens in the cities of Judah. Nobles are hung by them, and elders are outraged. Young men are forced to grind at the mill, and children stagger under loads of wood. Gone are the elders from the gates, and young men from their music. Gone are all the delights of our hearts. Our dancing has turned into mourning. The crown of glory has fallen from our head. Woe unto us, for we have sinned. For all this our heart is faint. Because of these things our eyesight is dim. Foxes roam about the desolate mountain of Zion. Thou, O Lord, shalt reign forever. Thy throne is for eternity. Why dost thou forget us forever and forsake us for so long? Turn us unto thee, O Lord, that we may return. Restore our days as of old. Thou hast utterly rejected us. Thou hast been exceedingly angry with us. Turn us unto thee, O Lord, that we may return. Restore our days as of old.
And you'll see that the last verse ends with rage, and so the rabbis have us read the second to last verse. And so I'll invite you to, I'll chant these last two verses, and then we'll come back to Hashivenu. Hashivenu. Hashivenu Adonai Elecha V'nashuva Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem Ki Imaos Mastanu Katzavtai Aleinu Ad Me'od. And we go back to Hashivenu. Hashivenu Adonai Elecha V'nashuva Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem Ashivenu Adonai Elecha Okay, so we'll stop here. That was most of the book of Lamentations. For some of us, I think the first time we read it. And so I'm just invite you to sit for a second, just quietly for a few seconds.
take in what you experienced. Maybe you feel something in your body, or there's a thought that's bubbled up, but whatever your reaction is, if it's in a particular part of the body, if there's a phrase that's coming to you, something that you read that's popped up that stuck with you, any reactions at all, just invite you to share. Yes?
So as this lightning storm and thunder rain down during this reading, very powerful to be experiencing words and at the same time this caffeinated sound there.
Yeah, it was, if you're, I don't know where you are on Zoom, but here on the Vista Road, there was lightning and thunder, now there's rain. It was happening during some particularly hard points in the text. So it was like a multimedia experience, yeah. Anthony?
Is there something to the fact that this holiday, this observance almost always happens during the hottest time of the year?
Well, is there something to the fact that it happens during the hottest time of the year? What do you think? Well, having now moved to Atlanta in the middle of July and August.
I don't know.
Don't know.
There's a lot about burning,
Yeah.
heat, ashes. You know, these are not very seasonal winter time
Right.
things. It's like, it's really, I guess, happens every year during the warmest time of the year.
Right. Obviously, it's not the same kind of summer in Jerusalem as it is in Atlanta, but it's summer. It's dry. It won't rain usually between, Purim, Passover, and Sukkot, right? So the fact that the temple was burned down and that Jerusalem was besieged and set fire in the middle of the hottest time of the year, I think it all adds to you can see these are visceral, doesn't even really cut it for some of these images in this text. So the heat just adds to it. I think, yeah, that's right. Other thought?
The part about the mothers eating their children was particularly shocking.
Yeah, mothers eating their children is gruesome. And that's the break fast, right? And there are references that feel a little like high holidays here and there. Renew our days, we say, and the idea of fasting. But this is a grotesque disfigurement of what would have been, life in Jerusalem. Right? And to think of the desperation, right, of what does that mean that mothers would eat their children? What's going on in the city? What's going on, for whatever we think of, the idea that there's a maternal instinct which may or may not be a real thing, and maybe it's socially constructed. It's at least a trope, right? That mothers will do anything to protect their children, and here we have the opposite, right? So it's particularly grotesque, yeah, and unbelievable, not believable, right? Okay.
So I was struck by two things. One is that contradiction that you mentioned early on, that somehow this is both our responsibility, we sin, we must take, it's our fault, this is happening because we sin, that there are those, that seems to be repetition, but then there's also, our enemies have done this to us for no reason.
Right.
And so it's this weird, I think, it defies having a particular moral. It's just like a bunch of imagery that hits you and all the feelings that come with that. So that was my one thought. My other is that it almost reads like this playbook for subjugation. Like how to make a group of people abject reversal of what human beings should be like, which is very frightening when you learn a lot of history of how people have been subjugated.
Yeah, that's a really powerful insight, I think. So I'll take those two things backwards and again try and repeat them for the Zoom. We still have folks on Zoom, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, okay. So
And tell me your name, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Adina.
Adina. So Adina says the second point first was that it's almost a playbook for the subjugation of a people. And this is an occupation, right? So this is the occupation of Babylon. This is the first temple, right? Stories of the second temple show up in the Talmud. This is the Babylonian occupation of Jerusalem, right? And it's a playbook. How do you break down spirit, right? You use verbal abuse. You take away food. You take away resources. You take away institutions, right? You use sexual violence, right? All of these horrible things, right? So, and we can talk about that. We will talk about it, or if you want, what does this make us think of today? Okay. So the first thing that you said was, again, the contradiction where, on the one hand, it's we cause this with our sins. On the other hand, it's these people are terrible and God, please punish them, right? And those are both grief responses. I think they're both legitimate grief responses. Sometimes they're useful for people. The theology there is we're the Jewish mind doesn't like the idea that there's a God over here but not a God over there, right? That there's a one God who's the God of everybody. That doesn't mean that the temporal God idea doesn't show up. So we say, Micha Mocha Ba'elim Adonai, who is like you amongst the gods, right? We say that when we got out of Egypt, right? So there's the God over, maybe there's the Babylonian God and the Assyrian God, right? But then, at this point in the Bible, I think we're getting to a point where we don't like that idea. So if there's one God over all the peoples, then why is God letting the Babylonians kick the crap out of us? Well, it must be that God is using the Babylonians as instruments of punishment, right? And that shows up a lot in the prophets too, right? And so that's one, like, okay, we've done something wrong. We've done a bunch of things wrong. And there's some powerful things there about what we've done wrong, and that about injustice. And the sin, you notice the sin, not so much you didn't keep Shabbos, or that you didn't keep kosher. The text talks about not hearing a case and not hear, the sin of Sodom, which American Christianity in particular took to be sexual sins. It's the sin of inhospitality to strangers and oppression of the poor. That's in one box, and in the other box, like, I hate them, please God kill them, right? Again, they don't necessarily match, but they're both logical trauma responses and grieving responses for people suffering. One and two about that.
I was just struck by how much this mirrors the curses laid out in the Torah.
Nice, yeah. Not nice, but yes. Yeah, so in the Torah, like, if you don't follow the rules, this is what's going to happen. And we try and read them really fast, right, because we don't like them. So here, that's what they are, right? That there's, again, this sense that God is bringing this upon us as a result of our straying. By the way, some of the language, I'm sure you noticed, has to do with a straying woman, and her skirts are soiled, and it's, I don't blame you if you don't love that. That sticks with me as not a great metaphor. But yeah. In the back. Sandra?
Yeah.
Okay.
Aside from the words and the history, the combination of the trope and the sounds of the trope along with those words created in me a sense of a very spiritual sense of being drained. An experience of feeling drained.
Yeah.
A draining, and in a way it was a good drain. It's letting all of that, by saying that, hearing that melody, creates that feeling. And so as a book, as a trope, it's a beautiful piece
It's beautiful, isn't it?
of Jewish liturgy.
It's one, some people, you talk, what do rabbinical and cantorial people talk about when they're hanging out, Like this is my favorite trope, Eicha trope, I love it, and it seems sort of incongruous when you're thinking about what it's about. But if you're on Zoom, what Sandra said is that the text together with the trope has a feeling of being drained, but almost in a good way. That it's like the release of maybe, I don't know, a wound. I don't want to get gross, but it's a pretty gross book. You're like relieving the pressure of living with suffering, in which, and somebody said, I think, Elizabeth, you said that all of our temples are despoiled in some way, right? So here's a book that's just like, here is all of my complaints, and I don't like it, and I want you to fix it. I don't know what we got to do to fix it, but I don't like what's going on. And so that release, right? I think I think you've hit something that's very much there. Other thoughts? Yeah, Yola.
I was interested in the duality of feeling pretty far removed from the experience of the voice, like not experiencing such suffering to this degree, at the same time being aware that people are suffering to that degree today at the same time. So it's like something that feels far away, but also very real too.
So the sort of the duality of the voice of the text being far away and in the past, and at the same time feeling like there are people experiencing this right now. Yeah. Do you want to talk about some of the resonances of what who's experiencing this? Or is that too much to take on as a coherent thought right now?
I mean, I could dive into it.
Yeah, go ahead.
People, experience oppression all over the world, like poverty, always rising all over the world. And, if you look at the news, you're not even shown much of the suffering. So much focus on just some nations suffering, but not other nations suffering. And
Yeah.
there's so much war, destruction happening, and it's so easy to turn up the screen off, not see it, but people wake up and they do have children who want food.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point that you're making. So Aola says there's you see that, we have, or you don't see it actually, we know that there's war, oppression, poverty, systematic poverty that's created, and we don't, maybe it's a headline, we don't really see it. And this text is making us see it and hear it, right? This is almost this is like a first person news report, right? Like, who would have believed, right? And we know that you don't want to believe what we're telling you. I know you don't want to believe what I'm telling you. Who would have believed this could happen? And this was a great place, man. We loved living here. This was the place where we were dressed in scarlet, and there were kings, and there were the highest of high priests lived here, and people went out, and this was a place where people came together. We talked about the pilgrimage festivals. This was a place of judgment, right? And who would have thought that it would look like this? That it would be, and people would walk the street, and their faces would become dark and shriveled to their bones. I know you don't want to hear this, listener, but I have to tell you, this is what our reality is right now. And that's incredibly powerful. The power of witnessing. Just reading this is a good, I think, practice of like, how do I sit with something I really don't want to hear? And that's sometimes the hardest part of grief, is to sit with the things that make us really uncomfortable, that we push away. There's so many ways to do it, right? Other thoughts? Greg?
Not a thought, but just more of a feeling and tapping into a feeling of heaviness.
Sure.
I'm feeling internally. Yeah, just naming that.
Yeah, it is a heaviness. I think that's a good word, that we're, again, used to pushing away, right? And there's lots of ways in modern society to not have to think about the things that feel this heavy. And that's one of the reasons I think it's such a powerful day. Yeah.
I'm Sarah.
Sarah.
This is a micro observation.
I expected the trope to sound more mournful instead of being in major. Sounded like trippy to me.
Sounded trippy, you said?
Yeah, cheerful.
Oh, cheerful, like chirpy.
Yeah.
The trope sounded more cheerful and is in major. Anthony, you have musical thoughts on this?
I just want to say the opposite feeling. If you think about specifically like Celtic songs, sad songs, like a ballad, and it starts out you know, that minor turn of the phrase. It's not. It's like the story actually. It's almost like the first half is like, we used to be dressed in scarlet, everything used to be made out of gold, everything was good. That's like the major second, the major part, and then the second part is minor. Now, you know, everyone is starving. Now there are rich people who are embracing trash heaps. It's like the story of this Megillah is in that little bit of the trope right there. It's like a major part, then a minor part, a pleasant part, and then like an unpleasant part that goes down.
Yeah, so Anthony is saying that the trope has two parts, a major part and a minor part, and the major kind of refers to the past glory, and the minor is the current catastrophe. Yeah.
I think that most people in this room probably don't know that Will wrote a song based on Lamentations, what we just wrote, and it's on one of our albums, and you can probably find it online.
Will wrote a song based on
It's
Lamentation.
called Sitting in the Dirt.
Sitting in the
And
Dirt.
it's very close to the first. I know the song pretty well, but I haven't read Lamentations. I didn't realize that it is very much what we just read. And it's written in blues, the style of American blues. So to really have that mournful yearning.
Oh, that's so fascinating. So,
I encourage everybody to find it online and you can probably facilitate that.
well, I'm making a pitch to have some of those videos put onto our website. So that's you know.
The audio, yeah.
This are some of the recordings. My project of many projects of my first week. But you know that could be under.
Accessible.
Yeah. But the blues, I mean, that's fascinating that he did it in the style of blues, and one of the reasons we were excited to. What's that?
Very powerful.
It's very powerful, I'm sure. So one of the reasons we were excited to move to the South is I love acoustic blues, particularly Robert Johnson, Charlie Patton, Tommy Johnson, and there's an exuberance in the suffering, right? And I cannot help but sing, yeah? I'm singing about being miserable, but I can't help it, so it's like coming out of me. It's a wail. Yeah. Oh, right, he mentioned Celtic music, right, for those who are on Zoom. It's a wail. Hear their insults. God, like we know God can hear their insults. God's God, hear their insults. Hear their insults and all the thoughts of my attacker's mouth. They mutter against me all day. Watch them sitting in rising sea. I am their mocking song. Yeah? So what does it mean to be a mocking song, right? Well, I'm going to respond with my own song. I'm going to tell you how I feel, and that's partly what's going on here. Yeah. Yes?
I really appreciated the reference and the comparing it to the current suffering in the world, but I still struggle with the theocracy that it must be God's fault that there is this suffering.
Well, not God's fault. So the question is, how do we deal with this theology of God doing this? Not God's fault. It's our fault, right? It's God's doing, right? And I don't mean to split hairs here, but but God is doing this because we deserve it, and the Babylonians are the instrument of God's punishment, and you don't like that.
I struggle.
You struggle with that. I mean, you're allowed to. That wasn't. It's really hard. That's a hard theology, right? And people have taken it to really ugly degrees, right? If you think, the Holocaust happened because fill in the blank, right? Like, really? Like, that's a just God? That's a just response? Is this fair? Right? And you hear that in the author, I think. Like, at the same time,
there's really legitimate things that the Jewish people have done wrong, but like, really, God? Is this what we deserve? This is what we deserve. We're sorry, help us examine our ways, but really, no? So and again, that's in trauma and grief. People go through all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of the speaker, and the speaker as sort of, the speaker must be a survivor of this.
Speaker's a survivor, yes.
And that I think adds another layer, because it's this sort of strange, like, somehow, I don't even know, there's that eyewitness piece, but there's also this sort of like, this has happened in the past, and it's not completely clear when the speaker is speaking. And I don't know, that just came up for me now.
Yeah, so what is there survivor guilt in addition to the anger and to the remorse and to the self whatever, blame, self-acceptance. I'm conscious of the time. So there's a question of why we're doing this again. Why are we sitting on the floor? Why are we still doing this? If you are not, some of us may be actively mourning the loss of the temple. It's important to note that prayers about the temple and prayers of Jerusalem show up throughout the Jewish history and liturgy since the second destruction by the Romans. There is Jewish control, governance in Jerusalem, the 6-Day War. The whole city is now controlled by a Jewish government. Of course, the temple doesn't exist yet. Does this make any sense? Am I actually wanting the temple to come back? Do I want animal sacrifice to come back? There's a lot here, right? And certainly the Reform movement took this away for a very long time. Nobody did Tisha B'av in the Reform movement. You will notice also that there's a lot of places in the Reform world called temples. In fact, there's a place in Atlanta, I have learned, called The Temple, right? What's that saying? That's saying that I'm not worried about this temple. I don't need this temple to come back because I got a temple. I got one in Atlanta or in Birmingham or in New York or in Oakland or wherever I am, right? That's the Reform movement made that was a very clear statement when they started naming their synagogues temples. They're saying, I'm not waiting for that third temple because I don't want it and I don't need it. However you feel about the temple, does it make sense to still do this thing? We've talked a little bit about that before. I want to look at two texts here. This is on page 2 of the Why Are We Sitting on the Floor? And then I think we'll sing a kina, a song of lament, and then we'll say Kaddish, and then I think we'll stop for tonight. So collective punishment, you see where it's under reminder? One of the reasons we observe Tisha B'av is as a reminder. This is collective punishment is related to economic sins. Does everybody see that? Okay. Elizabeth, could I get you to read that where it says collective punishment?
This is the second point.
Under reminder.
Collective punishment is related to economic sins, such as social injustice, public corruption and robbery. The fate of the generation of the flood was sealed because of robbery. If this is true of the nations of the world, there's no reason to assume that Israel are an exception to the rule. Stealing from the community, whether by such white-collar crimes as not paying taxes or by profiting from public office, is worse than private crime, in that it is not
clear who the victim is, and thus to whom the money should be returned. Moreover, Rabbi Moshe Mukotsky, in his work Sefer Mitzvot Gadol, blamed the length of the exile on fraud and lies practiced by some Jews against the Gentiles.
Okay, so
Meir Tamari is a teacher I like to return to a lot, an Israeli ethics teacher. Part of what's powerful here is that we're talking about collective sins. And where do collective sins show up? They show up in social decisions. They show up in social injustice. If the Jews are, as a group, are practicing fraud, that's going to extend the exile. If there are white-collar crimes that we turn our eyes away from, there's no way to figure out, like, if somebody passes a budget that takes money away from prenatal care, and babies are born underweight and don't do as well in school, and you can do the whole downstream thing better than I can probably. Who compensates who? How does that? We still can't figure out reparations in this country. Maybe a collective remembrance like Tisha B'av is really important because we have committed collective sins. So that's one thought, which I think is powerful. And let's have from Rabbi, well, no, actually, she's a social worker, Lisa Rothstein Goldberg, and that's the last text. Get up.
Okay. The temple no longer stands, but I have experienced the holiness that is that site, and the modern state of Israel as a testament to our people's survival. Tisha B'av used to seem so ancient and difficult to relate to. It is sadly ironic that I never wanted to feel that sense of mourning, and now I do. Here we are at this time, as when this was written in 2019, and I have, so interesting, right? And I have found myself mourning a lot recently, not just as a Jew, as an American, to be sure. Pittsburgh and Poway have shaken us to our core. Just wait. But it's not just us. The FBI reports that hate crimes nationwide have risen dramatically in recent years. As I write this, the nation is still reeling from the most recent mass shootings in El Paso and Dayton. By all accounts, the El Paso shootings appear to be a hate crime. El Paso is 80% Latinx. 2 days ago, over 600 immigrants in Mississippi were rounded up in an ICE raid as their children attended their first day of school. Make no mistake, the American soul has lost its way. How sadly ironic that after all these years, I have found a modern reason to mourn on Tisha B'av. Lisa Rothstein Goldberg.
And like you were saying, Rebecca, I mean, I think you said just wait, right? It's 2019, and we've had more shootings, and of course we've had COVID, which has revealed a lot of cleavages in our social fabric, tears in our social fabric. Let's finish this part before we say Kaddish with song. If you have the photocopies of Eicha, the very last page, Actually, if you're using it, English opening, it's the first page. That's the last page if you've got it. It says 48 on the top, and it's Elysion. And this is one of the most famous keynote dirges, songs of suffering and sadness. And we'll come back to the first two lines, which are at the top and are indented in the transliteration. Elysion ve'areha kemo isha v'tzireha v'chivtu la chaguratsak al ba'al nehureha alei armon asher nitash ba'ashmatzon adareha ve'al biyad mecharpel metoch mikdash hadareha Elysion ve'areha kemo isha b'tzireha v'chivtu la chaguratsak al ba'al nehureha alei galut mishartel mani meshir zemareha ve'al damam asher shufach kemo memei oreha Elysion ve'areha kemo isha b'tzireha v'chivtu la chaguratsak al ba'al nehureha. I invite you to rise in body or spirit. And in our book, $334 and 335 in our Siddur. We'll finish with Warner's Kaddish. Again, it is customary not to greet folks in the usual way. We will invite you, however, to help Abby and Greg put the room back to the way it was. And may we all be comforted amongst the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. Yitkadal, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabbah. Be'alma divra chirute, v'yamlich malchute, v'chayechon v'yomechon, v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, b'agala v'lizman karib v'imru. Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam u'almei homaya. Yitbarach, v'yishtabach, v'yitpa'ar, v'yitrumam, v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar, v'yitaleh, v'yithalal, Shemei dekudeshat, barichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechamata, damiran be'alma, imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'al kol yoshvei tevel, imru amen. Zecher Tzadik Livracha, may the memory of all righteous ones be for a blessing. And we say amen.
Amen.